So Daniel and the unprecedented 19 Bible prophetic points to shape up, and many fulfilled between 2023 to 2024. This is an unprecedented time, and we're going to crush through this because I know you're going to have a lot of questions and everything. And what I want you to do is just bear with me for a few minutes and let me share some things, and then we can jump in on some Q&A on it. The topics are going to be: did John see a succession of 8 kings? And did Daniel? And then Daniel chapter 8 connections, which is really interesting regarding our time. And then the 19 plus events to be watching for between 2022 to 2024. And the 5 critical events between 2022 to 2033. And then we'll jump into some Q&A on it. And I know that we're behind on time on this, so we'll go ahead and go quickly on these things, and so we can cover the information, and again, be writing down your questions, and we'll get to that Q&A part there. Just from Daniel chapters 7, 8, and 11, there are at least 40 unique leaders referenced regarding our day. These 5 leaders directly above have already fulfilled prophecy. Now, the U.S. has already been identified as the country Grecia in Daniel chapters 8 and 11. We're going to be going over that. You'll see clues as to why Grecia in Daniel chapters 8 and 11 represent the U.S. And yet there's so much more to cover. We won't be able to cover everything we want today, but we're going to cover a lot of things. So between 2022 to 2024, I expect 10 individuals in 9 countries to be revealed. All right, did John see a succession of 8 kings? In Revelation chapter 17, John sees the beast that has 7 heads and 10 horns. Starting with verse 1, it says, "And there came one of the 7 angels which had the 7 vials, and talked with me, saying unto me, Come hither, I will shew unto thee the judgment of the great whore, that sitteth upon many waters, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-colored beast, full of the names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns." The angel tells him what the meaning is. The angel said unto me, "Wherefore dost thou marvel? I will tell thee the mystery of the woman, and of the beast that carrieth her, which hath 7 heads and 10 horns." Regarding let's look at verse 9. "And here is the mind that hath wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sitteth." In verse 18, we learn that the angel which thou sawest is that great city which reigneth over the kings of the earth. Now, that city might be in existence right now, but the time as to when it reigns over all the kings, that's still in the future. In Revelation chapter 17, it also talks about there's another meaning to the 7 heads. In verse 10 we read, "And there are 7 kings, 5 are fallen, and 1 is, and the other is not yet come. And when he cometh, he must continue a short space. And the beast that was and is not, even he is the 8th, and is of the 7, and goeth into perdition." So there's actually 8 kings that are being referenced right here. Now, note the 8th king, the beast, gets destroyed by Christ's return. In Revelation chapter 19, verse 20, we read, "And the beast was taken, and with him the false prophet, that wrought miracles before him, with which he deceived them that had received the mark of the beast, and them that worshipped his image. These both were cast alive into a lake of fire burning with brimstone. And the remnant were slain with the sword of him that sat upon the horse, which sword proceedeth out of his mouth, and all the fowls were filled with their flesh. Now, so we saw that John was told about a succession of 8 kings. Now what we want to do is we want to look to see if Daniel was told about the succession of 8 kings. In Daniel chapter 11, verses 2 through 45, many kings are referenced. Within the many kings is a succession of 8 kings. In both cases, the 7th king doesn't last long. In Revelation chapter 17, verse 10, we read, "And there are 7 kings, 5 are fallen, and 1 is, and the other is not yet come. And when he cometh, he must continue a short space." In Daniel chapter 11, verse 20, we read, "Then shall stand up in his estate a raiser of taxes in the glory of the kingdom. But within few days he shall be destroyed, neither in anger nor in battle." Also, in both cases, the 8th king lives to the return of Christ. In Daniel chapter 11, verse 45, the last verse, it says, "And he," this is the vile person, the person which I call the 8th king, "he shall plant the tabernacle of his palace between the seas in the glorious holy mountain, yet he shall come to his end, and none shall help him." Then in Daniel chapter 12, it continues the events. And remember that when they wrote anciently, they didn't divide the chapters. Now, chapter 12, verse 1 says, "And at that time shall Michael stand up, the great prince, which standeth for the children of thy people. And there shall be a time of trouble, such as never was since there was a nation, even to that same time. And at that time thy people shall be delivered, everyone that shall be found written in the book." And so chapter 12 does end with the return of Christ. So now let's verify the first 6 kings. And what do we know about the country they are from? The angel in Daniel 11 spills the beans. Daniel chapter 1, or chapter 11, verse 1 says, "Also I, the angel, in the first year of Darius the Mede, even I stood to confirm, to strengthen him. And now I will shew thee the truth. Behold, there shall stand up yet 3 kings in Persia, and the 4th shall be far richer than they all. And by his strength, through his riches, he shall stir up all against the realm of Grecia." So now we know that the kings are going to be from Persia. Now, Persia was renamed Iran back in 1935.
Hey, Lowell, I want to jump in for a second
Sure.
and make sure we're tracking. This covers so much territory. So what you're saying initially is that Daniel and John from the book of Revelation, are both seeing the same 7/8 kings. Is that your point?
That is exactly the point. That
Right.
is exactly it. And they're in a succession. So there's no time gap between them. So this is really important, because that means that if we're anywhere close to the return of Christ, then the first king or the second or one of the 8 is alive and ruling today. And
Okay,
if
so
we
your
can
first point,
prove as
your
to
first
which
point,
king
your first point is your first point is that there's 7/8 kings, and the second point is this isn't about the ancient times necessarily. It's also about the last days.
it is not about the ancient times at all. This is strictly about our day.
Yeah.
These
Okay.
are a succession of kings.
All right. I'm following you. Thanks, man.
You betcha. All right. And verse 3 says, "And a mighty king," is the 4th king, "shall stand up, that shall rule with great dominion, and do according to his will. And when he shall stand up, his kingdom shall be broken, and shall be divided towards the four winds of heaven, and not to his posterity, nor according to his dominion which he ruled. For his kingdom shall be plucked up, even for others besides those. So in verse 5 and 6, what we want to get out of there is that there's going to be a kingdom of the south and a kingdom of the north. And the king of the south shall be strong, and one of his princes, and he shall be strong above him, and have dominion, and his dominion shall be a great dominion. And in the end of years they shall join themselves together, for the king's daughter of the south shall come to the king of the north to make an agreement, but she shall not retain the power of the arm, neither shall he stand, nor his arm, but she shall be given up, and they that brought her, and he that begat her, and he that strengthened her in these times. So now we're on to king number 5 over here. And now, verse 7, now, but out of the branch of her roots, kingdom of the south, shall one stand up in his, the king of the south, estate, which shall come with an army, and shall enter into the fortress of the king of the north, and shall deal against them, and shall prevail, and shall also carry captive into Egypt their gods with their princes, and with their precious vessels of silver and gold, and he shall continue more years than the king of the north. So the king of the south shall come into his kingdom, and shall return into his own land. So over here on the chart, and I don't know if you can see my mouse, so if you could let me know if you see my mouse on the screen or not, that would help me to know.
Yeah, we're following your mouse.
Excellent. Wonderful. So now you can see that we have the second king of the south, and he goes over and gets revenge on the king of the north, takes their silver and gold and their gods, and he comes back, and he outlives this king of the north over there. Now in verse 10 we read, but his sons shall be stirred up, and shall assemble a multitude of great forces, and one shall certainly come and overflow and pass through. Then shall he return and be stirred up, even to his fortress. And the king of the south shall be moved with choler, and shall come forth and fight with him, even the king of the north. And he, the king of the north, shall set forth a great multitude. But the multitude shall be given into his, the king of the south's, hand. In verse 18, we're just going to skip to what happens to this second king of the north. I call him the sixth king. After this shall he turn his face unto the isles, and shall take many. This statement right there comes into play a little bit later on if we get time enough to get there, but try and remember it. He takes many isles, but a prince for his own behalf shall cause a reproach offered by him to cease, and without his own reproach he shall cause it to turn upon him. Then he shall turn his face towards the fort of his own land, but he shall stumble and fall and not be found. So that's the end of the sixth king there. And then we had just read verse 19, and then we had already read verse 20 before. This is when the seventh king takes over, and then after the seventh king, then in verse 21 we read about the vile person. It says, and in his estate shall stand up a vile person, to whom they shall not give the honor of the kingdom, but he shall come in peaceably and obtain the kingdom with flatteries. And he is in play all the way to the end of the chapter. As we mentioned before, he goes to fight against Christ when Christ returns. He shall plant his tabernacle of his palace between the seas in the glorious holy mountain. So what's, that you got the over in Israel, you know, you have the Mount of Olives, and then you got the Mediterranean Sea and the Dead Sea over there. Yet he shall come to his end, and none shall help him. That's when Christ returns. So now, Revelation and
Okay,
Daniel.
can I jump in
Sure,
just for a second, buddy?
you betcha.
So as I'm looking at your diagram, on the left-hand side, you're showing us, on the far left, you're showing John's revelation. On the right, you're showing first is Daniel revelation, and then the two strings of Daniel's revelation. But everything on the right, both here and here, the left and right side of the right, that's all Daniel, and the full left-hand side is all Revelation, right?
Right. So
Okay.
Daniel chapter 11 starts with 4 kings, and I say that the fourth king is Khamenei of Iran right now,
Uh-huh.
and he's going to have a battle with Grisha, and we'll
Okay, so
find out who Grisha is.
why do we say the fourth king? How do we come up with a fourth king? Are you going to cover that?
We are covering it,
Okay,
brother.
excellent. So I'm just want to be clear for everybody that even though it split in two a minute ago, he was still following Daniel on the left and the right side, and that John is over here on this other side that was not on the previous screen. So everything split there was all Daniel in the past. Is that right?
That is
Okay.
correct.
You're doing
Thank
awesome,
you.
man.
All right. So the heading of Daniel chapter 11 reads, Daniel sees the successive kings and their wars, leagues, and conflicts that lead up to the second coming of Christ. Now, so from verse 2 to 45 is talking about all these kings right over here. And so if we're anywhere close to the return of Christ, then we're somewhere between verse 2 and verse 45 of Daniel. And that's a really fascinating way to kind of say, okay, where are we at in the book of Daniel? Now, in the past 200 years, Persia, Iran, has not split into 2 or more kingdoms. We cannot be any further than the fourth king. The end of the fourth king events have not happened, and the events of the fifth, sixth, seventh, and eighth kings have not happened. Let's look for more evidence we are on the right track, that this interpretation is holding water. The fourth king of Persia, Iran, is to be far richer than the first 3. Again, in Daniel chapter 11, verse 1, it says, And also I, in the first year of Darius the Mede, even I stood to confirm and strengthen him. Now I will shew thee the truth. Behold, there shall stand up yet 3 kings in Persia, and the fourth shall be far richer than they all. And by his strength, through his riches, he shall stir up all against the realm of Grecia. So, the first king, Pahlavi, he started to reign in 1925, and then his son took over after that.
How do we know he's the first?
And the way we do that is that I'm going backwards on it. And as you can see here on this chart, that the first 3 kings were worth $1 to $3 billion each. But Khamenei, this was put together back in 2013, and he was over $95 billion then, and I'm sure that he's over $200 billion now. So what we're looking for is 4 kings. We're looking for the fourth king to be far richer than the first 3, and Khamenei and his 3 predecessors, they fit that. And it's interesting that with that first king, he changed the name from Persia to Iran. And since that time, we're now on the 4th leader. But it gets even more interesting here. If Persia is today Iran, which modern-day country is Grecia? Obviously, Grecia is the country Iran is stirring all against. That would be the United States. Why would an angel 2,500 years ago call the U.S. Grecia? That had me stumped for such a long time. a long time. I made this discovery back around the year 2000, but I could not discover why the angel called me Grisha until about probably 7 years ago or so. And someone said, I know why. And I said, please tell me. And they said, what's the welcoming image of the United States? What does the White House look like? What does the Supreme Court building look like? And what does all the statues around there look like? And the Washington Monument? It's all Greek architecture. It's all Greek architecture. So the angel gave us a clue 2,500 years ago that we would be able to recognize today. Mystery solved. So, Khomeini of Iran is to battle Grisha, and Iran is to split into at least a kingdom, into two kingdoms. Again, in verse 3 it says, and a mighty king, Khomeini, shall stand up and shall rule with great dominion and shall do according to his will. Which he's been doing that, hasn't he? And then verse 4 it says, and when he shall stand up, his kingdom shall be broken by Grisha, and shall be divided towards the four winds of heaven, and not to his posterity, nor according to his dominion which he ruled, for his kingdom shall be plucked up even for others besides those. And then in verse 5, and it talks about the king of the south and the king of the north, and that the king of the south is going to send his daughter over to make an agreement, but the king of the north ends up killing her and killing them that brought her, and he that begat her, and he that strengthened her.
If we go back to the fourth king,
yeah,
you had said to the rest of us, well, we clearly see that's going on, right? About Khomeini exercising dominion over everywhere. But I don't know if that's commonly held knowledge. Can you talk a little bit about Khomeini and how he's exercising dominion over these?
Absolutely. ISIS was a big issue back in 2014, and ISIS really started to gain a lot of territory, and then Khomeini and Erdogan stepped in, and they started to help the United States to flush out ISIS, and so Khomeini got a nice foothold in Iraq because of that, and also over into Syria. And if you remember, there was a time in which we were trying to have a regime change over in Syria, and so we were supporting one group, and Iran was over there supporting the existing government. And so it was a proxy war, and it still is, but the United States has pretty much given up trying to make that regime change over there in Syria, but Iran, in essence, they want it, and no regime change.
Okay, so if we look back, we say, well, since the Persian Empire was changed by Pahlavi, we have the three kings who were, wealthy, but then we've got this $200 billion guy, this Khamenei, and he's fitting the bill because he's exercising influence in Yemen, in Syria. He pretty much runs Iraq today, and he's already the king of Iran, right? So is that kind of what we're talking about?
You got it. Got it. And the evidence builds as we go along here into Daniel chapter 8. So we'll keep on pushing along here and get everybody armed with the information that I'm looking at, and I'd like to get to where we can also quickly touch on Daniel chapter 7, and then we can take some questions. All right. There's more information about the interpretation over at Bible Science Happening. And if you just go over to Bible Science Happening and go to the Discoveries area, in Daniel chapter 11. There's more information there. Okay, now we get to Daniel chapter 8, and this is interesting. So let's just dive right in real quick. So we're looking at a lot of activity to start to happen over the next couple of years. In fact, I'm already thinking that we have some people figured out here in Daniel chapter 7. So I'd like to get to Daniel chapter 7 so we can touch on that. But this area over here is Daniel chapter 8. And we're going to be focusing in on this right here. And one thing I point out here is that, these people haven't fulfilled prophecy yet. Yet, they can't fulfill prophecy without first being leaders. So, will they fulfill the prophecy? Do I have them pegged right? Well, let's go ahead and take a look at some information about it. Daniel chapter 8. Besides Christ, there are only 8 kings of our day referenced in the chapter. The last one, the little horn king, goes to fight against Christ. 4 of the 8 come into power about the same time. These 4 right here. And there could be just one king between the Grisha king leader, so this person right here, and the little horn king, which is right here. So it could go from him to like this person to here. So there'd just be that one person in between this Grisha king that he starts to talk about and then this king over here. It gets interesting. That looks like Christ had come in 2 to 3 decades from the time of the first king of Grisha referenced. So here's how it begins. Verse 1. In the 3rd year of the reign of King Belshazzar, a vision appeared unto me, even me, Daniel, after which appeared unto me at the first. And I saw in the vision, and it came to pass, when I saw, that I was at Suzanne in the palace, which is in the province of Elam. And I saw in a vision, and I was by the river Ulai. Then I lifted up mine eyes, and I saw, and behold, there stood before the river a ram which had 2 horns, and the 2 horns were high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher came up last. The angel gave the interpretation. In verse 20 we read, And the ram which thou sawest, having 2 horns, are the kings of Media and Persia. Well, I had already identified Kamini as one of the kings, but who's the king of Media? Well, ancient Media covered this area here, which goes into part of Turkey. And so years back, I was watching Erdogan and trying to see if because it looked like Erdogan was like a Hitler type of a guy. And I was looking for anyone that could become higher than Khomeini. And I was thinking, well, Erdogan has a long ways to go to become higher than Khomeini. He's pretty powerful. Well, then there was a coup attempt, June 15th, 2016. And on the 16th, Erdogan regained control, and then on this is in July, in July, and on July 17th, Muslim scholars worldwide declare Erdogan to be the supreme leader for the entire Muslim world. July 17th, 2016, Erdogan fulfilled prophecy in becoming higher than Khomeini. So he came up second, and he became higher than the first. And what we learn from that is that Erdogan is a president, and yet he's described as a king. So kings can represent presidents, presidents can represent kings. fascinating prophecy fulfilled there. Now, in verse 4, it says, "And I saw the ram," so this would be Erdogan and Khomeini, "pushing westward and northward and southward, so that no beast might stand before him. Neither was there any that could deliver out of his hand, but he did according to his will and became great." Now, notice that pushing east isn't mentioned. And you take a look over the past few years, and they have been pushing to the west, north, and south, and not noticeably east. So this prophecy, Daniel chapter 8, verse 4, is in the process now. But let's find out what happens next. This is where it really gets interesting. Verse 5, "And as I was considering, behold, an he-goat came from the west on the face of the whole earth and touched not the ground. And the he-goat had a notable horn between his eyes." That's a massive attack. He comes from the west on the face of the whole earth and touched not the ground. And the goat had a notable horn between his eyes. What is that notable horn? What does that represent? The angel gives the meaning over here. Verse 21. "And the rough goat is the king of Grecia, and the great horn that is between his eyes is the first king." Now, what does that mean, it's the first king? I still want to have better clarification on it, other than we've had many presidents, but perhaps this is the first president that's being referenced in Daniel chapter 8. But let's see what happens. This is a massive attack. Well, let's look at verse 6 here. "And he came to the ram that had two horns, which I had seen standing before the river, and ran unto him in the fury of his power. And I saw him come close unto the ram, and he was moved with choler against him, and smote the ram, and brake his two horns. And there was no power in the ram to stand before him, but he cast him down to the ground, and stamped upon him, and there was none that could deliver out of the ram out of his hand. Therefore the he-goat waxed very great, and when he was strong, the great horn was broken, and for it came up four notable ones towards the four winds of heaven." What we're reading about here is that this king of, or leader of Grecia, who attacks Khomeini and Erdogan and removes them from power, that's going to be a successful attack. It's going to be a massive attack. He's going to come from the west on the face of the whole earth and touch not the ground. He's going to stamp upon them. Which U.S. leader does that sound like? Does that sound like a Biden attack? Do you think Biden would go over and attack Iran and Turkey and remove those two leaders? It doesn't sound like that to me. But I can see Trump doing that. When Trump was in power, I remember him talking about Iran at one point, and also North Korea at another point. And he was saying, if you do that, in essence, he said, if you do that, we are going to come over and we are going to hit you so hard. That, he spoke like that. Well, it's interesting because what we're finding out in this prophecy is that, we're going to remove Khomeini and Erdogan, and he's going, after that, he's going to wax very great, and when he is strong, somehow, some way, he's going to be leaving power. And when he leaves power, then the United States, the 50 United States, is going to split into four nations. Four nations. And I'm anticipating that to happen in 2025 to 2026. So this is a very, very serious situation. And it's why I'm reaching out to people and talking to politicians and talking to candidates and talking to everyone I can, because We don't want to go into anarchy. We don't want to go into tyranny. If we're going to split into another nation, then we want to hold on to the Constitution, and we want to have a more smooth transition. Uh, when I look at the angel doesn't tell us. Let's look at what the angel does tell us. In verse 21 it says, "And the rough goat is the king of Grecia, and the great horn that is between his eyes is the first king. Now that being broken, whereas four stood up for it, 4 kingdoms shall stand up out of the nation, but not in his power." So we take a look at how divisive the nation is right now, and we can really see it. The angel doesn't give us what the boundaries are going to be. But so many people I talk to say, "Oh, I can see that." We got the West Coast as a socialistic country. We got the East Coast as a socialistic country. We got the Bible Belt, and then we got the Rocky Mountains going eastward. And so, how are you doing on time here, my friend?
We'd like to be able to ask you a couple of questions, and then we've got another speaker lined up. So I've seen some questions. Somebody was not clear about Turkey being the modern leader. So I know we got kind of started in a really quick footing, but I just want to make sure that we are kind of getting the foundation. I just put a poll out if people would like to hear some more in the future. And so please check on the poll and see what your thoughts are. And I'm wondering if you can do anything to kind of fill in the blanks around these first 4 kings, the first 5 kings. Can you backstop a little bit more, give a second round so people can get a sense of really kind of nailing in where you're coming from?
Why will the U.S. attack remove Erdogan? Sure, the relationship between the U.S. and Turkey has been a lot better in times past, yet we are not ready to attack them now. What is going to happen to cause us to go over and remove Erdogan? This is something to keep on our radar screen. It takes time to prepare for such a massive attack on 2 places, Khomeini's regime and Erdogan's regime. And again, how it's described is coming from the west, covering the whole earth, and touching not the ground. And my guess is that that's going to be towards the end of 2023. Now, does that help a little bit, or do we need to go back over to the 4 kings?
I'm going to put up another poll. We're kind of running out of time here, Lowell, and we're going to run forward with that. So you've been done awesome, man. I really appreciate it. The poll that I got up was, do you want to hear more of Daniel and Revelations later? And what I have is 68 people said yes, 3 people said not right now. So that's a pretty good response. And I'm going to follow up with another poll while we're at it. So is there anything that you can share with us? You want us to go someplace? It's Bible Science Happening. I've got that. I will share that with everybody.
And there's an LDS section in there. And so when you go to Bible Science Happening, click on Discoveries. And then on the overviews at the bottom, it says LDS references. Click on that. And there is some clips in there that go over some of the Doctrine and Covenants, section 87, section 88. And those are really, really relevant as to what's going on right now. So I really encourage you to get over there and do that. And sign up on the newsletter thing so we can keep in touch. So there's a phone number for you and an email for you and a little bit of contact information for you guys.